So good morning again, everyone. This is Tom Doran with ABC Computers. Welcome to our presentation today, How to Go Paperless with Zetadocs Document Management. Our presenter today is Ryan Poliniak. He's with Equisys, and they are the authors of Zetadocs. As many of you may know, Zetadocs is built in to the NAV system, so many of you will have it built in and something you can use at no cost to get started. And we found it to be a really great way to improve efficiency and save money. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this webinar. You will get a survey at the end, and we would appreciate your filling that out so we can do a better job going forward. And now I will turn it over to Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. As Tom mentioned, my name is Ryan Poliniak. I work with Equisys, and we're the developers of Zetadocs for NAV, which is a suite of document management tools that is integrated very tightly to Dynamics NAV and even included in some of the later versions. So thanks to ABC Computers for putting this webinar on today so that we can make sure to inform everybody of what's included in NAV and also what's available. ABC Computers is very strong in the Zetadocs field. As many of you may not know, or you may know, they were the 2013 Zetadocs Partner of the Year. So they certainly have embraced the technology and have a very strong understanding of it. So I encourage everybody to ask questions today in the Q&A pane. We'll be monitoring them as we go, and we'll try to get to some of the questions after the demo sessions, and then as well at the end. If there's anything that we don't have time to answer, we'll be sure to respond on a personal basis via email or phone. So here's a look at what we're going to cover today. I'm going to introduce everybody to Zetadocs in general for those of you who are not familiar with it, and then we're going to focus on Zetadocs Express, which is the foundation level of Zetadocs, which is included in some of the newer versions of NAV. Now, not to worry if you don't have one of the newer versions of NAV, certainly all Zetadocs functionality is available back to an NAV 3.7 database and even including the classic client. We'll talk then about the ability to upgrade that Zetadocs Express software on a named user basis so that your power users can get more functionality as needed, and then your light users can continue to use that Zetadocs Express software. We'll do a demo of Zetadocs Express, and then later on in the presentation we'll do a demo of some of the typical solutions for the upgraded versions of Zetadocs that you can buy through ABC Computers. And we'll talk about kind of some action steps, what to do next, and try to mop up any final questions at the end of the presentation. So this is why we're all here. Paperwork certainly is something that can strain productivity and causes businesses to incur a significant amount of cost. Paper-based processes leave all kinds of inefficiencies in a business, everything from producing documentation and printing it and mailing it to filing documentation, and then, and very importantly, retrieving that documentation. So what Zetadocs aims to do is to digitize all of your paper documentation, electronically file it, so that we can get the right documents in front of the right people at the right time. So Zetadocs touches a lot of different areas of document management, and I'm sure that many of you on the call have interest in different areas seen here. Everything from scanning paper documents to archiving emails to sending emails and sending faxes from NAV and integrating that process into your document management system so that you have copies of sent documents to provide you with a complete audit trail for the different transactions in NAV. And I'll demo a lot of these different areas today. We don't have time in an hour to go into Zetadocs and into every nook and cranny of it, so I'd encourage anyone that has some significant interest in one area or another, contact ABC and we could set up a personalized demonstration or a call. So here's an overview of how Zetadocs works, and we're certainly going to dig into this more deeply during the demo sessions. So Zetadocs allows us to bring paper documents, faxes, emails, electronic documents into the document management system in a variety of ways and have that documentation presented on screen for the NAV user right inside the NAV client. And that's something that you'll find is a common theme with Zetadocs. It's built right into NAV. It's designed so that users can access their documentation right from the transaction screen or the customer card or the item card or wherever they might be. So the NAV user then has a variety of tools to link this documentation to the appropriate transaction in NAV. That might be by scanning paper and having it automatically link, or dragging and dropping an electronic file onto an NAV record. And those documents are then available either in the document repository, which could be SharePoint, or it could be a network folder on your file server if you don't have SharePoint and you don't want to install it. And that makes documentation available for NAV users through the NAV system, as well as for non-NAV users through SharePoint or through the file folder. Now, the other side of the equation, of course, opposed to bringing documentation in and archiving it, is sending that documentation out. So some common uses of that are electronic invoicing, or sending customer statement runs, delivering POs to your vendor. There's a process that has to be done to accomplish that, to email those or fax them, and Zetadocs automates that process, and then it integrates the whole thing so that your sent items are copied alongside your captured items. So before we get into the demo, why document management in general? Well, of course, near and dear to everybody's heart is reducing costs, and that's certainly something that document management accomplishes, particularly through reducing the amount of consumables that are required, reducing paper and ink and toner costs, postage costs for delivering documents through the mail, but also enhancing business processes and streamlining productivity so that employees can better use their time. That's a big cost savings as well. I've spoken to organizations that have somebody who spends an entire day printing invoices and stuffing them in envelopes and posting them and sending them in the mail, or spends an entire day filing. And these are big drains on productivity. That time is much better used elsewhere. Something like Zetadocs certainly can help accomplish that. So moving on to customer service, and this is something that's often overlooked with document management, but having the right documents in front of the right people at the right time allows your customer service reps to respond to questions from customers much more quickly and efficiently. So imagine with a paper-based filing system, a customer calls in with a question, we've got to go to the filing cabinet, retrieve the documentation, scan it, email it, refile it. Now, all the while, the customer's either waiting on hold or waiting for a callback, and we also have a large risk of misfiling documentation or losing it or having it go home in laptop cases, and there's a tremendous amount of risk involved with that. So improving the level of customer service that you're all able to offer by having that documentation electronically on screen is a big reason to look at document management. And then, of course, becoming ecologically friendly. More and more companies have a green initiative these days to reduce the carbon footprint of their organization, and certainly document management would be right at the forefront of projects to help accomplish that goal. So a little bit more about Zetadocs in general. Of course, we've partnered with Microsoft to include Zetadocs in NAV. Zetadocs Express, which will be our first demo here in a few minutes, offers some basic document management capabilities for NAV 2009 R2, as long as you're using the role-tailored client, that is, NAV 2013 and NAV 2013 R2. Now, I don't want to confuse people with older versions of NAV. All the functionality of Zetadocs is available with older versions. It's just that you don't get that set of features that Zetadocs Express offers at no additional charge from Microsoft until you're on one of the more recent versions of NAV. There have been over 4,000 downloads of Zetadocs Express so far. That's all in the NAV space. So the ability to upgrade Zetadocs Express is something I've already mentioned, and Zetadocs is modular so that different users can have access to the different features as needed instead of having to upgrade an entire system. Now, last year, we reached our 500th installation of the full Zetadocs for NAV product, and that's something that the that was a big milestone, and since then we've gone over and above, approaching 600 any day now. And these are all NAV customers. They all use Zetadocs. They've all got their stories to tell. So certainly, visit our website if you'd like, Zetadocs.com or Equisys.com, and read some of the case studies for how your peers, your other companies that use NAV have deployed Zetadocs for NAV in their organization. So what's new with Zetadocs? And this is something I'm sure some of you are familiar with Zetadocs. Some of you probably use versions of the product to varying degrees. Well, we've just released a new version of Zetadocs that's compatible with NAV 2013 R2. That's the latest release of NAV. And that's something that is important to note, that Zetadocs, since it's an NAV-only product, since it's included with NAV, we will always maintain compatibility with the latest releases. So very soon, in the next month, we'll have compatibility for the NAV web client, which is something many of you may be using with NAV 2013, also deploying the NAV client via click once. And one important note, the network folder archive option. Many of you probably who have Zetadocs or have heard about it know that SharePoint up until now has been a requirement for Zetadocs. It's something that had to be installed as a prerequisite to use the Zetadocs capture functions. Well, that requirement has gone away, so that now you can store documentation to a network folder if you don't have SharePoint and if you don't want to install it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go into the demo. So let's talk about Zetadocs Express. I want to make sure everybody's familiar with what they have already available to them, and then we can move on to some of the more advanced stuff. So NAV 2009 R2, as I mentioned, only for the role-tailored client, and NAV 2013 R2 all include Zetadocs Express. It will be right in your license file when you get your NAV license. Now, it's got to be downloaded and installed, and it's got a few areas of functionality that I'm about to demo. And the idea is it gives you some basic document management capabilities for all of your users without having to buy anything. And then from there, you can decide what path you want to take to further enhance your document management system, your quest for the paperless office, by upgrading some of your users to other versions of Zetadocs. So there is no cost. You do have to be on your business ready enhancement plan when to get Zetadocs Express. So that's something to consider. It's available out on customer source and partner source, and ABC computers can install it for you fairly quickly and easily. So let's get into our first demo, and I'm going to be showing really two main areas of functionality, and that's the save and send, which is simple document delivery, and then the drag and drop archiving of documents to NAV. I want you to keep in mind that these processes, while I'm going to show them in the AP side, can be expanded really anywhere in NAV, even to very heavily customized versions of NAV. So I've launched into NAV 2013 here, where I've got Zetadocs installed, including Zetadocs Express. And I am in a purchase order for a vendor named Comacycle. So what does Zetadocs offer me in terms of archiving and sending documentation? For starters, once we create this PO and it's time to send the document off to our vendor, we're going to have to, in traditional methods, save the document as a PDF, open an email, attach the document, enter the subject line, enter the addressee information, and that all takes time. So with Zetadocs Express, we've streamlined that with the save and send feature. And this can be added to send any report in NAV. So what does it do? When we click the button, it's going to automatically PDF the report, attach it to an email. It's going to name the file attachment and the subject line according to the document type. In this case, it's a purchase order. And the record ID, the purchase order number in this case. And then it's going to automatically address it from information on the vendor card. Now, likewise, if I was sending an invoice to a customer, then it would be addressing information from the customer card. Now, this save and send feature, while it is useful for sending a single document, it can be upgraded, as you'll see later, to send multiple documents at once, and also to do things like automatically complete the email body and do some customized automation as well. So one thing to note here is that not only have I streamlined the sending of this PO, but I've also archived a copy of it. And that's important because obviously most companies archive paper copies of POs in a filing cabinet. This replicates that. It's automatically backed up every night, and more importantly, it's going to be made available. As you'll see here in a little bit, Zetadocs has an AP approval solution, and it will enable us to circulate copies of these purchase orders along with invoices and shipping documentation out to approvers so that they can be automatically approved. So we'll be getting to that in the advanced features demo in a little bit, but for now, the important thing to know is that Zetadocs Express offers this Save and Send button, which PDFs the report and saves a copy of it to my Zetadocs archive. So when we send this PO off to our vendor, and they send us an invoice back, we can then use the drag and drop functionality of Zetadocs Express. If you see the drag files here box on the right side, to archive that information, to archive that invoice. So we've got some options. We can drag and drop the attachment right out of the email and archive it. And now we've got access to our original purchase order that we sent our vendor, and we've got access to the invoice that our vendor sent to us. Now, you can see here we're starting to build an electronic audit trail. We're starting to have all the documentation that we need right in front of us. Maybe the vendor sends us an email with some important information on it in the email body and not just in the attachment. Well, it's very easy to also just drag and drop an email itself out of Outlook. So you can drag it and drop the email right onto the record and archive it. Now, what has that done? When we go click on that email, it will open up not only the email with the email body, but also the attachment of the invoice. So now it really just depends on whether or not the information in the email is pertinent. Now, something to note here, Zetadocs has actually stored this email into the document management system, and it treats it like any other file. Now, the importance of that is if I go into Outlook and I delete my email, it's of no consequence. It's still going to be available through Zetadocs, through my document management system, until it's deleted out of the repository, which would require permissions for the user to do so. So it really allows us to free up our Outlook inboxes and Exchange servers and not have to store as many emails on our servers. Now you can imagine if the vendor called in with a question about this, it would be very simple for your AP department to look at the purchase order, to look at the invoice that they sent, and to look at any corresponding emails very easily to respond to that query from the vendor. Likewise on the customer side. As I mentioned, this Zetadocs fact box where we drag and drop files can be added anywhere into NAV. If you have the classic client, you don't get Zetadocs Express for free, but you can buy Zetadocs Capture Essentials, which we'll touch on in a minute, and you can add the same drag and drop functionality into the classic client. If you've got any questions about that, feel free to type them into the Q&A pane, and we'll be sure to touch on it. So the idea is that you can deploy Zetadocs Express across your organization for your light users, people that need the ability to view documents or drag and drop, and then some of the other areas can be upgraded as needed, and we'll cover that in just a minute. But that covers Zetadocs Express, the save and send feature, the drag and drop feature. I'm showing it in a purchase order, but you can imagine using it in a sales order or a posted sales invoice or a customer card or vendor card. There are a tremendous amount of options in terms of where to deploy Zetadocs. So any questions about Zetadocs Express so far? If there's anything that's come up, feel free to ask away, Tom, and I'll do my best to answer. If
people could type. Oh, go ahead. So Ryan, just for the attendees, if you would type in the box, if I unmute everyone, we tend to get a lot of background noise. So if you would type your questions, I'll make sure I relay them to Ryan.
Okay, great.
And
all right, so
hold on, we've got one here, Ryan. Do documents follow purchase orders to purchase invoices?
Great question, and yeah, and I should have mentioned that. So the question there is, when I archive documentation to this purchase order, when I post it, obviously the purchase order disappears and it becomes a posted purchase invoice, posted purchase receipt. Yes, certainly all documentation follows throughout the posting routine. That happens on the sales side as well, as the sales order becomes an invoice. And likewise, and there's something else of note here. This is very different than the Zetadocs record links or the NAV record links feature, in that it's not pointing to a particular location that it's looking for these documents. It's actually linked them in a different way so that even if the document location moves, the link will not be broken. But yeah, thank you for that question. Certainly, documentation follows through the posting routine.
One more question. How does this work with VPNs?
Well, the VPN, obviously, if you're VPNing in, you're on the network just like anybody else. So the key with Zetadocs is that you have access to SharePoint or to your network file where you're storing the documents. So if you're a remote user and you're VPN'd in to use NAV, you'll have access to all your documentation. There really shouldn't be any limitations there. I guess I would need to know really in a little bit more detail how you hope to use the VPN, what the environment's going to be like, and I can answer that, but certainly no limitations with Zetadocs over a VPN network.
And does drag and drop feature work with Citrix? And then we'll put a cap on these, and we'll come back and open it up for questions in just a few more minutes.
Sure, certainly. So if you have your NAV client deployed via Citrix, the key is with drag and drop. If you wanted to drag and drop from something like Outlook, you would have to have that Outlook client in the same terminal services session to do the drag and drop in one step. You can't, due to Windows limitations, drag and drop something from a non-terminal session straight into the client in the terminal session. But there are ways to do it by sharing a network folder. Simply drag and drop the documents into that and then drag and drop it onto the transaction. Better way would be to deploy Outlook through the same terminal session. But Zetadocs fully supports Citrix, to answer your question. All right, so I'll move on. Any more questions, we'll be sure to wrap them up here. So hopefully everyone's got a good understanding of Zetadocs Express, what it offers. Let's talk about some of the more advanced solution sets and how it all fits together. So Zetadocs Express, it's a foundation level Zetadocs edition. It's no additional cost, and it has some capabilities in terms of delivering documentation, as we've shown, as well as capturing documentation with that drag and drop mechanism. So let's say, for instance, you have Zetadocs Express deployed throughout your organization, and your accounts payable team says, well, the save and send feature is nice, but when I invoice, I need the ability to send all of my invoices at once, as opposed to sending 50 individual documents. Well, that might necessitate an upgrade for a few of your users to either Delivery Essentials or Delivery Plus, depending on the requirement. And the main reason to do that would be to get access to batch document delivery, access to automatically completing the email body, and pulling data from NAV to complete the email body. And I'll show that in the next demo here in a few slides. And then Delivery Plus adds on top of that the ability to fax documentation and the ability to set up some customized business logic to meet particular demands. And that's something that's important to note with Zetadocs. It's very customizable. There's a full SDK that can be leveraged by ABC computers to create a variety of functionality to meet your specific business needs. And they're well versed with how to use that SDK. So another area of upgrading Zetadocs would be on the document capture side. Zetadocs Express offers drag and drop document archival. Of course, if you have an older version of NAV and you want drag and drop document archival, you can get Capture Essentials. And then Capture Plus enables really the batch scanning of large amounts of paper, let's say vendor invoices or customer POs or signed delivery confirmations, bill lading, shipping documentation, and the archival of that documentation to NAV where Zetadocs Express, you could certainly scan a single document to your email and drag and drop it. And really, it's going to be your document volume which is going to determine which version is most important for your organization. Very low document volumes, let's say you get 5 vendor invoices in a day, Zetadocs Express can likely meet your needs. When we're talking, a higher document volume, maybe Capture Essentials or Capture Plus are needed. So one other offering from Zetadocs is the Payables Approval module. This is a module that allows AP teams to monitor their approvals and send purchase invoices, purchase orders out to approvers, whether they're on-site or remote, whether they're NAV users or not NAV users, and it presents those approvers with a snapshot of data from the transaction along with all the supporting documentation that's been archived with Zetadocs so that they have all the information that they need to make an approval decision. And I'll be showing that in just a minute as well. So let's get into some of the typical solutions of Zetadocs, and we'll demo it as well. So really, the ways that Zetadocs can be used in NAV are very widely varied, and we've seen them deployed in all kinds of manners. The most popular ways to use Zetadocs, or the most frequent ways, I'm going to try to cover in the demo. And starting with the electronic invoicing, Zetadocs delivery is very simple to put in. It's very effective in helping organizations streamline their invoicing process, and that's something that I'll be sure to demo. Tracking proof of delivery documents. Your driver goes out with a shipping confirmation, goes to the customer, and the customer signs it, and the delivery driver returns it and puts it in a stack. At the end of the day, we could scan all those documents in and have them automatically archived. That's tremendously powerful depending on the requirement that your organization has. Something that's hugely popular with Zetadocs, processing supplier invoices or vendor invoices. A lot of companies get a tremendous number of paper invoices in. There's almost certainly some kind of inefficiency or bottleneck in processing those unless there's a solution in place. And Zetadocs offers a great solution for managing those invoices. And then finally, AP approval, as I just mentioned, getting approval information out to our approvers and eliminating bottlenecks so that POs can be sent to vendors and payments can be made, something that Zetadocs handles quite well. And just a little bit more about the approval solution, and then we're going to demo. Zetadocs, typically when an approval is done, an invoice comes in or a PO is generated, and then the NAV user has to circulate some paper documentation up to the approver. Well, Zetadocs streamlines that by sending a notification to the approver, and that can be an automated process where different approvers are assigned for different departments or for different dollar volumes, and that approver has everything they need on screen to make their decision, even kicking it up to a next level of approval depending on dollar value limits or department code again or any other kind of code from NAV, where in a normal paper-based approval process, if, let's say, approver number 1 or number 2 was out of the office, there would be a delay. There would be a bottleneck. We'd have to wait for that approver to come back. We'd have to somehow manually get them their documentation. Excuse me. And with Zetadocs, that's avoided by giving approvers access to all the information they need, including the supporting documentation, right on their smartphone or tablet or laptop. And I'll show that in the demo here in a minute so that the bottlenecks can be removed. Now, meanwhile, that approval initiator has a full dashboard to monitor outstanding approvals, overdue approvals, approved, rejected transactions, and keep track of the process. And then, of course, they could use Zetadocs delivery to send out their PO to their vendor or to make a payment. So, what does electronic approval get us? Number one, it gives us improved visibility. Everybody across the organization, whether you're an approval manager, an approval initiator, or an approver, can look at where every approval is in the process, manage bottlenecks, and make sure they get through the process. And that can all be controlled by delegating approvals and setting out of office or adding additional approvers. And then that control can even be automated with our intelligent workflow engine so that approvers are auto-assigned. Approval limits can be set so that department heads or CFOs or CEOs have to approve high dollar volume transactions. And then that ability to approve documentation anywhere. Today's workforce is a mobile one. Everybody works on smartphones and tablets or laptops at the airport, and having the ability to view all of this stuff with just a browser-based login really streamlines the ability for everybody to collaborate, whether they're in the office or not. So let's look at a few of the advanced features in action, and I'm going to focus on a few of them here that are listed. Vendor invoice processing, then I'm going to show the approval module, and I also want to show electronic invoicing using Zetadocs Delivery, because I think it's something that a lot of NAV users have a requirement for as well. So let's begin. We've already showed Zetadocs Express, so let's begin with archiving supplier invoices. Now, we saw in this demonstration of Zetadocs Express that when our supplier emailed us an invoice, we were able to drag and drop it onto the appropriate transaction and archive it into the Zetadocs document management system. That process is great if we've got a low number of invoices, but typically where there's a high number of invoices, especially paper invoices, we need a better solution, and there are a few options. So number one, with Zetadocs Capture Essentials, the ability to scan a document directly to the transaction is added. And you can see I'm hovering over the Scan Document button. So if you had a single invoice and you wanted to just import it into this transaction, you could put it on the scanner, scan it right into the solution, and archive that paper, avoiding the steps of having to scan it and then drag and drop it. Now for higher volumes of paper, there's a better method of archiving this documentation. So I'll go into a purchase invoice, since we've been in the purchase order most of this time. And if we get an invoice in, typically we're going to come in and we're going to either create a purchase invoice for it, or we're going to go out and find our PO in the system. And what Zetadocs allows us to do, let's say we get this invoice in and we go out and we create a purchase invoice in the system. Well, we can go in and we can print a barcode. If you see where my mouse is hovering on the ribbon here, we could print a barcode right out of the purchase invoice or right out of the PO or out of anywhere in NAV. This process could be replicated really anywhere that you want. And when we print that barcode, it's going to print out to a label printer right on our desktop, small footprint, easy to maintain piece of equipment. And we're going to take that barcode, put it on the document, put the document in a stack. It's really minimal interruption in the process since we're already going into NAV anyway. The only additional step is to print the label out, put it in a stack, and then at the end of the day, we can scan a whole stack of these vendor invoices or whatever other type of documentation that we're trying to archive, and they will archive into the appropriate transaction in NAV, whether that's a purchase invoice or a PO, or if we're archiving customer POs on the sales side, or employee documentation to an employee card in the HR module. It doesn't matter where we're working. We can add this functionality anywhere. Now, imagine this is as opposed to taking that stack of invoices, manually filing them, or circulating them to our approvers, and then having to retrieve them manually through that filing cabinet every time. The alternative here is to scan them, to have them automatically archived into our Zetadocs archive, and then available on screen for easy retrieval. And that's where the power of this supplier invoice processing solution comes in, and it's why it's a very popular use of Zetadocs for NAV. So likewise, that same solution can be used to archive things like signed proof of delivery documents, delivery confirmations, work orders, service tickets. And you can see here on my left side, I've got a Zetadocs document queue option, and I'd like to take a minute to talk about these document queues. These queues are inboxes for documentation that require some type of action or some type of archival, and they're very useful for multi-user environments where we might have remote locations and central processing, and everybody's everybody needs to collaborate. Using these document queues, remote locations can scan their documents into Zetadocs as long as they're on a VPN network, or as long as they're on the network itself, and they can present the documentation on screen so that users can archive the documentation as needed. So I'm in a purchase document queue here. This is something that comes with Zetadocs Capture Essentials. And if we got a vendor invoice in from a company and we wanted to scan it in and have it processed centrally, the central processing team could have the ability to archive that document by clicking the archive button and then selecting which transaction it belongs to. We'll link it to an existing purchase invoice and then go select which purchase invoice it belongs to. Now, at the end of the day, this is accomplishing the same thing that dragging and dropping will accomplish. But it's up to what your processes are like to determine what process is going to best fit your organization. So maybe it's the document queues, or maybe it's drag and drop. I'm going to remove this document from the queue and delete the file and go on to my next one and archive it in the same way. Now, if I go back and have a look at my document queues, I can see that I've also got a POD queue. That stands for Proof of Delivery. Now, this is more of a customized queue that is created with Zetadocs Capture Plus. And if we have a look here, we can see that the link column is automatically filled out. In other words, Zetadocs already knows where these documents belong. And if I have a look at these documents, these were delivery documents, sales shipment documents that were created in NAV, printed out, and we put a barcode on the document as it's printed so that we don't have to put a label on it. And then it goes out and it gets signed by the customer, or it gets marked up in the warehouse if it's a bill of lading or something of that nature. And then these documents can come back and be scanned in as a batch, just like those supplier invoices that I talked about a minute ago. And it gives us a great way to archive this type of documentation that's been manually marked up. So, you know, scanning that paper documentation in and having a variety of ways to accomplish that, that's really where the more advanced Zetadocs modules come in. Now, once we have that documentation available, how do we create an approval process, or how do we execute an approval process, as I mentioned earlier? So for this purpose, let's do an approval of a purchase invoice. And I'm going to quickly create a new one, which I know everybody knows how to do. It only takes a moment, though, and I will show how we then send this off for approval. I'm going to put a line item in here so I could show how that flows throughout the process. And then I'm going to archive some documentation. Doesn't really matter what it is for these purposes. I just want to show everybody how the documentation flows throughout the process as well. So I've got some documentation here. It could be the invoice that the vendor sent us. Maybe we could find an invoice here. It could be an email. It could be pricing information, SLA information, whatever it might be. So as I'm the approval initiator here, you know, I'm in the AP team, and I want to get this transaction approved by the department head or by the budget holder, or, you know, whoever's approving these types of transactions. You can see here in the upper left, I've got a Zetadocs approval button. Now, if I click this, it's going to launch me into my Zetadocs approval website. And it's all based in the cloud, and we did that for a reason. It affords everybody the ability to access this documentation and this data remotely. So I'm still the approval initiator here. And when I launch the approval, it's going to give me a preview, a snapshot of data pulled from NAV, and it's going to automatically assign my approver based on rules that I have set up. If I had a rule for this one to escalate approvals, there could be additional approvers here, or I can add them manually. And there's a tremendous amount of flexibility there. I can also add a comment. Please approve for payment. And you can see the history section is blank now because I haven't begun this approval yet. But as I send this off to Charles Smith for approval, I'll show you how that approval history flows throughout the process and how the comment flows throughout the process as well. So I'll click Start. And what I've done here, I'm signed in as Ryan Poliniak in the upper right into our approval system. I've sent this transaction off to Charles for approval. You can see it right here, Custom Metals Incorporated, $68. And I can manage all of my outstanding approvals here. I can manage my overdue approvals. I can see what's been approved. I can see what's been rejected. And this gives me, as the approval initiator, a great dashboard to monitor this type of information. If I go in here and I see that there's an approval that's overdue for Charles, I can resend it to him, or I can email him, or I could call him, or I could walk over to his desk and ask him, to take care of that so that we can eliminate those bottlenecks. Likewise, if he's out of the office, he can access his stuff remotely and eliminate these bottlenecks from anywhere. So let's have a look at Charles' inbox. And this is, you can see Charles Smith in the upper right. This is his Outlook.com inbox. You can use any email. It doesn't matter what you use for this solution. If I click on the email, this is what Charles just received at 11:40 a.m., just a minute ago. He received our custom metals invoice. It's letting him know it's been assigned for approval. So he's got a few options. He can view the approval, which will take him directly to this transaction in his approval system, or he can view his entire task list, which I'll show you in a minute, and that way he could go through all of his approvals without having to go through his email. So if I choose to view the approval, as Charles, I'm going to now see a snapshot of data from NAV. Even if I'm not an NAV user, I can still see this data. I don't need an NAV license. And I can see all the supporting documentation, including the invoice, any emails, and I can view this documentation on my mobile device, on my tablet, on my laptop, and this gives Charles everything he needs. He could see a history. He could see when it was assigned to him. He could see that the approval was started by me, and he could see my comment, please approve for payment, and this gives him everything he needs. So if he rejects it, he'll have to put a comment in saying why, so that there could be some back and forth and some communication there. Now, if he approves it, it's going to, of course, update the approval initiator's dashboard to let them know that it's been approved, and it's also going to release the transaction in NAV. As you can see, this has been switched to released, and that will allow for posting and payment. We see a lot of NAV users filter through their approved transactions using some of the NAV functionality, and they're using that status to do so. And so what they're doing is filtering to see which transactions have been released, and in the status column, and they're choosing to see those, and now they can see, okay, here are our 4 released transactions, including the one we just did. They can then post that batch or post them individually, or do whatever they will with them. So the last thing I want to show before we hop into some more questions is electronic invoicing. This is hugely popular, and it's not just for invoicing. It can be used to send statements or POs or order confirmations. Literally any NAV report that you have that you want to send like this, you can do it with Zetadocs. So the way that you execute this is you set up some rules in Zetadocs dictating how different customers or different vendors receive different types of documentation. Could be via fax or via email, or maybe still even a hard copy to a printer. And the way you execute it is you actually print the documents to Zetadocs. So instead of printing them to a network printer, I just use my NAV print filters, which most of you are familiar with. I'm going to use invoice number here, but you could use any parameter. And when we print the documents to Zetadocs PDF, Zetadocs will pick up all those rules, all that logic that we've set up behind the scenes. It will email our emails through the Outlook client or through your SMTP server. It will send your faxes out through a fax server, integrated fax server called Zetafax, which is also our software, and it will print your hard copies out to a network printer. In practice, all of your invoices could already be gone. I've got this preview screen set up to show during this demo so that everyone can see that it's available. You could toggle it on or off in the settings very easily, and it shows you who the invoice is going to, what company, contact, delivery method, etc. And then you can just click OK to send the documentation out. Now, if I go into Outlook here, these are going to start queuing up and going out through my sent items. the email body's already been completed. Contact name has been pulled from NAV, invoice number pulled from NAV, company name pulled from NAV, and you could set this up to look however you want and to pull whatever data you want from NAV. And then we've got our invoice attached as a PDF. You can overlay stationery onto your report. We've got Zetadocs stationery on this one. You can add attachments like terms and conditions or marketing materials, and that really gives your documentation a consistent look and feel as it's on its way out the door. Even if you wanted to do some customization for things like attaching the appropriate signed work order for an invoice, things like that can be done with Zetadocs as well. So you can see my documentation's queued up and going out. My faxes are going out through the ZetaFax server. Hard copies are going to my printer. So that's all we have time for the demo. We've got 15 minutes left. I wanted to give everybody a good overview of the functionality, which I think we've done. Any questions, please type them into the Q&A pane, and I'm going to go back and I have a few more slides to go through.
So, Ryan, we do have a few.
Sure.
One, I think we addressed, it says, does capture depend on barcodes? That answer is yes, and I think you saw the stickers and the barcodes that could be printed on the documents. But
sure. I would like to expand on that a little bit, though, Tom. So what's going on there is Zetadocs is actually using an OCR engine to read the barcode, and the barcode is a very nice, consistent way to get those documents linked and to get reliability in what it's reading. You can use that OCR engine to read text on the document and link that way. It's just difficult sometimes with different vendors to get that information on the document the right way. So we use the barcode sticker as a way to guarantee reliability and to make it so that there doesn't have to be a safeguard in place to check for missed documentation. If you have a requirement, if you really are dead set against the barcoding, there are options. So we should probably take that one offline and talk about it.
Sure. And then the next question is, in sending approvals, can this be done for every purchase order or linked with some rules? So, if it exceeds a certain dollar amount or something along those lines.
Yeah, so it's certainly, the rules are very easily set up. Didn't have time to cover that today, but it's not even, it's a configurable rule system right in the web interface where your administrator can set dollar volume limits to determine who the approver is, department code to determine who the approver is, or product code, anything, or vendor name. It's really configurable so that you launch the approval and it automatically selects not only the initial approver, but also any incremental approvers that have higher approval limits. That can all be set up without any coding. It's all just a configurable rules system. I'm glad to show it to you in a one-on-one meeting if you'd like to see it.
And then the last question is, was Capture Plus available for NAV 2009 Classic or only available for RTC?
Sure, certainly, and that's a point that I want to drive home. All of the functionality that I've showed today is available for Classic Client for older versions of NAV, including Capture Plus. Certainly very much available. There's no loss in functionality. It's just that Microsoft gives the drag and drop capability and the save and send capability out included in the license for later versions of NAV, including our World Teller client for NAV 2009 R2 and then the later versions. But if you have Classic Client, you can get everything that I've showed today, no question about it. Now, one caveat, the approval solution requires web services, just the approval piece. So if you don't have web services, you can't do that.
Good. Let's see, some more questions coming in here. Approval function, does that also work on sales orders or other areas?
Well, right now it's just AP approval, so it's purchase invoices, posted purchase invoices, purchase orders, and purchase quotes. We're about to extend that to include expense approval. That will be coming out in a few months. And then from there, I think we will continue to expand it. But for now, that approval solution is just an AP side solution.
Thank you, Ryan. Other questions from the group? The queue is empty right now, so we've responded to everybody that I see. So if I have missed your question, please do type it in again so we make sure we get you an answer.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we'll have hopefully a few minutes at the end here to follow up with any other questions. So, as I've
So
mentioned,
one
go
more,
ahead.
Ryan, and then I'll let you finish
Sure.
your slides there. Can you
Sure.
add documents to the queue from an outside source, i.e. a vendor uploading invoices through a portal?
Okay. So the way that, you know, really, if you gave them access to your network in some way where they could scan documents into your to a network folder, you could do it that way. You know, a portal. I would imagine you're probably referring to using a SharePoint portal. There's no way for a vendor to go into SharePoint and upload a document to Zetadocs because the archival process works from NAV to SharePoint, not the other way. Now, you know, if your vendor could scan them in to a network folder on your system, then certainly they would have the ability to do that. But you know, I'm glad to talk to you about that. I want to see exactly what you want to do. But the short answer, you know, for uploading from SharePoint to NAV, there's not a way to do that.
Okay, I better let you get back to your slides. So we'll try to open up for questions as we wrap, but you go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, great. So, you know, I covered electronic invoicing and purchase orders and purchase invoices. Those are the most popular ways to use Zetadocs. But it's important to know, you know, if you have customized version of NAV, if you have some other types of documentation, vendor contracts or W-9s, employee documentation, you know, expenses, you know, product spec sheets that you want to attach to the item card, anything that you can imagine, if you want to index it by NAV data, can be done using Zetadocs. And, you know, I've just concentrated on a few of the more popular areas here. And here are a few quotes from some NAV customers, and I think that it's important to see kind of the variety of benefit that they see from it. So from everything from integration to saving money on hard costs like consumables, but also, you know, saving time. That quote that popped up in the middle, every day we're saving 2 working hours with Zetadocs. This equates to 1 week in every month. That's a tremendous amount of advantage that can be allocated elsewhere. And, you know, everything from customer service to hard cost savings to productivity savings. And I will say that there's a, you know, Equisys.com, I'll reiterate, it's a great resource for sharing Zetadocs with others in your organization. There are a whole set of solution videos, 5-minute videos showing things similar to what I showed today, from the supplier invoice processing to approvals to electronic invoicing. You know, I encourage everyone, go out, look at the videos, read the case studies. Let me know what questions you have. You know, ABC is very knowledgeable about Zetadocs. They can answer a lot of your questions. I'm glad to jump in and have a detailed conversation with you as well. But this website, Equisys.com, or you can go straight to Zetadocs.com, is a fantastic resource. And Zetadocs.com is also where you would find Zetadocs Express for download if you're on one of the supported versions of NAV. And it's also, Zetadocs.com has the videos, it has the technical information that you need, and that will help you determine if you can use any of the upgraded Zetadocs modules for some of your users, for your power users, and ABC Computers can then get you a proposal for the full Zetadocs solution that you need, or they could just install the Express solution for you. It's really just going to depend on your unique business requirements. So that's really it. That's what I have, Tom. So are there any other questions that have come into the queue?
Not well. I will, just for the sake of the group, there were a few questions I answered privately, but this presentation will be available on our website as well as all of our other presentations under the recorded webcast section. If you're interested in receiving a specific link to that presentation, if you send me an email, I'd be happy to send that out to you. Typically, it's usually ready by tomorrow, so I will send those links out for folks that have asked for it. Any other questions for Ryan before we wrap up today? Here's one. Oh, nope, somebody was giving me their email to send it. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, just let Tom know if you need a copy of it. Big thanks to ABC Computers for organizing this today. Everyone who's on the line here knows, you know, they're pros with NAV. They're also pros with Zetadocs, so you're in good hands. If you've got document management requirements, you're certainly with the right company. If there's anything that you need from me, always feel free to reach out directly, email me, or call me. If you need pricing on Zetadocs, you would get that through ABC themselves, and we're all here to help. Just let us know what we can do.
Great. Well, Ryan, thank you very much. Thanks to all our attendees for making time today. We certainly appreciate everybody's effort and the dedication you gave to the presentation, and we hope you found it useful, and look for our webinars upcoming. Thanks to everyone, and have a great day.
Great. Thanks, everybody.